Welcome to the Data Pour. I'm Luke Little. Today we're going to be getting drinks with Lucas Ward.
How's it going, Luke?
Hey, let's get a drink.
Let's do it.
Thank you for joining us, Lucas.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me about your position at Ippon.
Sure. I am a senior technical manager at Ippon, which just means that I manage some of our technical consultants. When we talk to clients, we usually say I am a cloud engineer or a DevOps engineer, but it's all to the same end.
But you're a people leader as well.
That's correct, yeah.
So tell me about that. Tell me about the dynamics of navigating client relationships while being a people leader at a consulting practice.
Sure. Managing people is always about speaking to their desires and their progression. And when you have technical resources, oftentimes they're very heavily focused on their technical skills. And so getting them to understand that although their technical skills may have got them a seat at the table, it's oftentimes just as important, if not more important, to lean into those soft skills and to help them grow with their communications and delivery on that front.
It's an interesting dynamic when you work at a consulting practice as a people leader. You have to balance the relationships with clients and the need to serve them with the need to grow your reports.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think, one of the things that always trips me up is in a typical organization, you are working with the people you're managing every single day. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes we end up on projects with our direct reports, but other times it's just a weekly check-in, and we may not be as tuned into the work they're performing on a day-to-day basis as we would in a more traditional organization. But this also can be a good thing because then you're not biased based on their most recent decision-making success or failure. We do talk to each other. If I have a direct report that's on a different project, I may talk to the tech lead on that project or the project manager to get some feedback on behalf of my direct report. But it does create a bit of a unique dynamic, especially when we have to deliver feedback just because we didn't witness it personally, and that can prove quite challenging.
How do you look for opportunities for growth for your reports?
Sure. So we have career roadmaps, paths we like to put people on, and we hope they follow because we obviously have an end goal where we would like them to end up. It's not always that simple though. Sometimes people are driven by passions for specific technology stacks and things like that. So we try to find ways that they can do something that they can get excited about, ideally for a client, in a way that grows their soft skills,
Yeah.
which is that's the golden path, obviously. But it's really just a matter of understanding your direct report kind of more personally and on a human level, so that you can then create a path for them to grow that lives within the confines of their worldview and their projects and their skill sets.
Yeah, it's hard to balance the your reports, their interest with what the client actually needs, what they need to be delivering. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I call that paying your dues. Maybe not the best way to phrase it, but just like in any job, occasionally you're going to have to clean the bathroom, and so sometimes you got to do the work that's required to unlock the work you want to do.
So the term consultant can mean many things. How do you define consultant?
So a consultant, in my mind, is somebody that can figure out how to put a square peg into a round hole, but also explain how they did it to the people that care about the peg fitting in the hole. So what that looks like without an analogy is, somebody that is having a wide breadth of technology experiences and skills with some depth in certain areas, but then can take that skill and propose it to a business as a value proposition or to execute on a project and then turn around and explain why that execution matters. And it's not an easy skill to grow in people, just because, especially in IT, we have a lot of quiet people, right? A lot of people that they like that they work on a computer and that they don't have to talk to a person. But we want them to learn how to talk to people, and not only that, but to help those people understand what it is they're doing on that computer. And it's a bit of a challenge for sure. But so a translator really is what they are. A translator, not just from technology to what is the technology doing, but to how does it provide value to the business, to the customer.
That makes sense. So at Ippon, we serve a lot of different sizes of clients. We serve large enterprises. Many of our clients are large financial institutions, banks, capital markets. We also serve a lot of mid-sized clients, and I know that you've focused a lot of your time here on mid-sized clients. What are some things that enterprise level clients can learn from the ways that mid-sized clients operate?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think in order for me to speak that, I need to share a little bit of background about myself. I kind of broke into the industry after some trouble breaking into the industry into a small to medium sized business. And at that business, I had to wear many hats. Small business in Charlotte called Lockdock Security. They do a lot of security and integration work, camera systems, but they also build mobile apps and websites, which is super random, but also very interesting. But working at a small or a mid-sized company, you don't just live in this thin slice of, ideal working area. You kind of have to take a product through not only the full life cycle of development, but also you may be the one that puts it into production. You may be the one that gets a call at midnight when it stops working. And so I think, when you work in an enterprise, you are having a very thin slice, a thin view of the greater picture, which is a good thing and kind of a necessary evil, because you have to have specialized people to keep those systems running, and especially at that scale and that throughput. But what you get out of that is highly specialized engineers. And so with the medium-sized clientele, these companies that are between 100 and 1,000 employees, they they don't have the money and the capital to hire massive teams. They also don't have the technology maturity. So they could still be running the same piece of technology that helped them grow to that size. And usually what that means is they've got a lot of legacy apps. They've got a lot of legacy technology, legacy processes. And so when you come into an environment like that, it's not always about where's the missing semicolon, where's the bug, it's more about, well, they're doing it this way because they've always done it that way, and they may not know what the better way is. And so what lessons can be learned from operating in that environment and can be taken to the enterprise? Well, just speaking from my own experience, working with enterprise architects and people that have been in enterprise businesses, switch the teams up. Move people around, uh, get people to learn the system as a whole, at least as a high level, so that they can be having more context and more understanding. But because when you're in those smaller companies, you really have to look at it from as far left as possible, the developer writing code and what tooling they're using, all the way to the artifact, hitting the production server. And there's a lot in between there. And stuff that you do right here, in the build pipeline may affect what your server or CPU architecture choice is, or 1,000 different things. And some of that context is lost in the enterprise. And so I'm not sure the best way to help enterprises get that, the capabilities that people grow coming out of those smaller size companies, and not lose the depth, because that's obviously super important. But I think it just, at the end of the day, it takes all kinds. And if you are an enterprise hiring manager and you're looking at the guy that came from a 100-person business or whatever, don't write them off, because they may have an immense amount of breadth of skills, if not so the depth.
Well, I think our risk culture, the risk culture in the financial community, with our financial services clients, is much different than the risk culture for a mid-sized business or even a small business that is still in the growth phase. Um, Although some financial service clients of ours are in growth phase as well. But it is it is interesting that we often have to reevaluate how we look at platform engineering to better serve our tailor solutions to a particular client, uh, given their maturity and given the their risk appetite.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I think there is the, chance to overcorrect in that area where you just completely stifle innovation. But you got to have the right balance of security and governance and proactive and reactive controls. I particularly like working environments where they have really awesome proactive controls, but with the right mix of lower environments without those controls. So you can go in and you can experiment. And if you open port 80 to the world and get hacked, it's just a dev environment. But a lot of companies, they want to get there and they struggle with the path from A to B. And so they mess it up. And then I know there's enterprises where they have overcorrected and it's just impossible to even do just small incremental changes. And then you wonder why, CTOs are asking, how can we reduce the cost of incremental change? And it's like, well, you gotta pull back the controls, right? You gotta balance that risk. And small companies, they don't want to get ransomware either, right? Medium-sized companies, and for them it could be a catastrophic event, right? Whereas other companies could potentially recover from that, not necessarily in financial services industry, but there's just like in life with all things, there's a balance that has to be struck in the technologies and automation you deploy, but also in the skill sets that you bring into the company. But no, it's a very good point.
It's interesting that you bring up ransomware. Been it, the needs of medium-sized businesses for resiliency are much different than enterprise businesses, especially in highly regulated industries. Ransomware is a great example where the potential impact of a ransomware attack in a medium-sized business that isn't strictly IT related and isn't financial uh, might pose a significantly might pose significantly less risk than, for instance, in a bank or a brokerage, at a financial services provider.
Sure, yeah, small businesses, medium-sized businesses sometimes can't afford like the disaster recovery that
Yeah,
like if
they
a
can't
large
afford a chaos engineer on
yeah,
staff.
right. Like if a large organization gets ransomware, they can just shut down all traffic to that environment, move them over here, hopefully identify what the threat vector was that led to that ransomware attack, remediate it in the failover environment. But ultimately, like business goes on, markets stay open, trades happen. Whereas in a small business, like they may have a failover environment, but it might not be regularly testing it, or they may not, have the capabilities or the money to set something like that up. So a ransomware could be like stop them dead in their tracks. It's another extinction level event for them,
Yeah.
and a lot of times they have no choice but to pay, which is not where you want to be, right? Because the door's still open, and the chance of it happening again is very high. But
I think that part of the difference between consultants and other engineers is that we have the intuition to be able to articulate, to identify and articulate those risks and understand what those risks mean in the context of different industries.
no, that's good. Yeah, that's something I really struggle with at medium-sized businesses is you oftentimes have very well-meaning CTOs, CISOs, tech leads, uh, product owners that they have read about or been to a conference or read a blog about what good looks like and what the big players are doing. And so that's what their target is, but it's an unrealistic, unachievable target. And what ends up happening is like, they strive for this level of perfection that is unachievable for their size. And so you got to be able to go in and say, hey, you're absolutely right. This is best practice for a bank,
Hmm.
and you are not a bank and you can't afford this, right? And that's a difficult conversation to have um, especially if you're not used to healthy confrontation. One thing that I'm very thankful for in my past is I used to manage restaurants. And if you've ever worked in a restaurant, you know that when things get stressful, there's shouting and there's arguing, and you got 86 potatoes, right? And uh, stuff can get fired up really quick. And so in that environment, learned how to keep a calm, cool head, have the conversations that need to be had. Um, we used to hire a lot of people. I worked for Jimmy John's, and we would hire people, and they would come in and they didn't know how to sweep. And you don't want to have to tell a 16-year-old kid how to use a broom, but you do it, right? And eventually you get some facility with how to approach people, how to have difficult conversations. And I found that actually translates really nicely into stakeholder management. It's not a 16-year-old kid with a broom, but it is somebody that thinks that they know best and they need to be told they're wrong, which can be difficult for them and for me. But, so just if you are having a diverse background before you entered tech, I challenge you to lean into that for the strengths that you may have from there.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about where we are today, but let's first start with you.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit more about your background.
Sure. So I mentioned LockDock, where I was a system designer. I actually had been working in the restaurant industry for like 10 years and was trying to get out, trying to break into tech. I went to school for computer science, so obviously that's what I wanted my career to be. And I went there and actually applied as a locksmith, of all things. And they interviewed me, and they were going to give me the job as the locksmith, which is cool. But they actually were looking at my resume. They're like, "Oh, we see you went to school for, computer science, and we're about to do this big system migration. Would you like to help us out with it?" And I was, of course, like, "Yeah, let's do it." And 4 years later, wrote some apps, built some systems, did a bunch of IT work for them. I decided it was time to move on. I needed some mentors, right? Like I was kind of the only IT person there, so I was wearing all the hats, which was an amazing experience. And I put my own first app that I built into production, which was another great learning experience. But I wanted to bigger scale, better mentors. So I went and worked for an IoT company called Centair in Charlotte, down in Steel Creek. They make IoT sent to person devices with a mobile app. Amazing company to work for, really great time. But again, we were like a crack R&D team. So there was, again, I kind of had this desire for mentor and more peers and teams. And so I was shopping around a little bit when a recruiter from Ippon reached out to me, and that's been about 3.5 years ago now. And I couldn't be happier. Ippon's a great company to work for, and I've worked on so many different projects. You just don't get even if you job hop once a year, you don't get the breadth of experience you get anywhere else but consulting, contracting. Most projects we work are 3 to 6 months. I did go on a very long project that was longer than a year, but for the most part, you see a lot. You see different teams, you see different technologies, and that really lends to just kind of a strong understanding of what good looks like, what bad looks like, and also how different people operate. And I think that variety of experiences, it's given me an immense amount of satisfaction and career growth, and it was kind of just a natural progression for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you have any advice that you would give to somebody trying to break into the tech industry?
Absolutely. Stick to it. Don't get disheartened by all of the AI, large language model stuff. There's plenty going on in tech. There's plenty of companies that are nowhere near ready to leverage AI, that are still hiring, still need good people. Don't be afraid to take that like super low paying web design job, or whatever you can get, right? Um, if you come straight out of school or a boot camp and you're looking for that shiny 6-figure income, keep on looking. If you find somebody along the way that's willing to give you a chance, take that chance. And and don't worry so much about the AI thing. I talked to a lot of UNCC students, grads, at a local meetup we have, and every month it's, well, is there still, do I need to change my degree? And someone more recently had this really awesome graphic that they showed, and it had like this circle with assembly language written in it. And they were talking about when assembly was the only programming language, and then C and C++ came. They thought it was going to take all of the assembly jobs, right? But the circle actually stayed the same size, and then the amount of C and C++ code became this. And what we're seeing now, I feel like, is a very similar thing where you've got human written code is this bubble, and we're going to create a new bubble that is way bigger, that is AI generated code. But the human written code is still there. The jobs are still there. And yes, we are in a market right now where there is a downturn with IT roles, but it's just part of the fear and uncertainty. I have a very strong feeling that that's going to ramp back up, and you're going to see it just grow exponentially. And as a coder coming out of college, yes, in the professional realm, your day-to-day may look different, but as a college student, you haven't even seen that yet. And so you're going to come and just naturally transition, and it's going to be fine. But if you're really struggling, you're really looking, keep the side projects going, have a repository where you can show your code, show your projects. Don't be afraid to dive into something that challenges yourself, stay learning, and just, don't give up. There's a place out there for you.
Ironically, my 88-year-old aunt said the exact same thing about assembly.
Really? So we're talking a lot about Charlotte, which is not where I grew up, but I did grow up near here. I did work here. My dad worked here as a police officer. And we're at the Charlotte Beer Garden, where they have more taps and loud cars and motorcycles than you can count. And this is a, what was it? OMB Mech?
This is Mechtoberfest.
Mechtoberfest. Okay,
Yes.
is that like a play on words with Mecklenburg County?
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it, but it tastes great.
Oh wait, I'm drinking the same thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
you are drinking the same thing.
So I am also drinking Mechtoberfest.
It's delicious.
It is very good, and I wanted to represent Charlotte.
Good job, OMB.
Yeah, OMB. So this was opened in 2020. It's one of the largest tap rooms on the East Coast.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We've talked about the differences between medium and large enterprises.
Sure.
So in the context of AI readiness, what differences do you see?
Yeah, so, every client is like hot on AI right now. They want to do it, they want to use it on multiple fronts. That's just across the board. We see large enterprises are thinking about training and fine-tuning how they can get their data house in order so that they can do these AI use cases, whereas the medium-sized businesses are still kind of just fumbling with like, can we use AI? And what I see a lot in these medium-sized businesses is they aren't really ready to leverage it. They may be able to bring it in from like a productivity standpoint at the developer side, or like, use cases that are off the shelf, but as far as taking their data that's unique to their company and their business and having an AI use case, it's usually far too siloed. There's no data warehouse, there's no data lake, there's no capabilities. They don't have the proper lineage or the proper cleanliness, the proper removal of personal information. And there's just this long list of things that it takes a lot of time and effort and people and manpower to really get set up, right? That doesn't mean that they shouldn't pursue that. Because guess what? All of those things are actually really good on their own without AI, which is why the enterprises are kind of more ready. But and from the enterprise standpoint, it's all about how can we turn this into business value and find a return on investment. So we've seen a lot of really cool use cases, especially coming out of Snowflake, like data enrichment. Things that used to be like, we paid somebody to scroll through 10 million records and take notes. They just send it in a batch job to a large language model. And also, guess what? Machine learning is making a huge comeback. We go to these companies and they're like, we want to use ChatGPT, we want to use Vertex or Cortex or whatever the technology is. And it turns out that regular old machine learning is actually the right tool for the job, which is more cost efficient, easier to build and deploy, And although it doesn't have the same buzz that large language models do, it's still extremely effective. And so I just think it's weird. It's the new like golden state, the new golden target. Like for years, people talked about migrating to AWS to lower costs and to have self-service infrastructure and leverage this service. This is just the next step in that, right? Like, well, we got to get to the cloud so we can use AI. Well, if you just migrate your legacy apps onto like VMware as a service on AWS, and they're still siloed, they're still legacy, they're still not clean, they're still not set up properly, that doesn't actually bring you any closer to leveraging AI. And so it's kind of like this with the small and medium sized business. It's like this tragedy of the commons where they know that that's where they're going, and they need to get there to compete, right? Or at least that's what they've been told. And it's just there's so many prerequisite steps. Now there are ways that they can leverage AI to help get there, right? They could use AI from a productivity, and when you talk about software craft, right? Like AI is a huge enabler of software craft, because you can feed it a code base or a pull request and get you can get good feedback, right? It depends on the model you use, depends on how you put your prompt. And with a lot of these like coding productivity tools, if you set your system prompts up right, like in Cursor, they have like a project file. If you put your software craft notes in there and then ask it to write some code, it'll go ahead and generate your unit test templates and all the different bells and whistles you want from a craft standpoint. And so I think it's interesting to me that the path to get to leveraging AI actually requires some AI usage too for an accelerator. But yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling now too long. So
I think that with medium-sized businesses, a lot of times medium-sized businesses are running so lean that they don't want to make that first step because they think that they're going to have to build a large-scale data warehouse,
sure,
hire people around that.
right,
But we also have to remember that that AI readiness is incremental.
yeah, no, this is true.
That
Yeah,
we have, the capabilities of enabling businesses at every stage of
yeah,
that journey.
they really need a guide, right? Like they need somebody to come in that knows how to look at the current state architecture, the current state of affairs, and from an AI readiness standpoint, prioritize these are the actions you need to take to start leveraging this technology. And I don't mean to sound like it's an impossible thing. It's like any technology. It's hard. Technology is hard, and where Ippon comes into the picture is we can come into your organization and people, processes, technology, right? We can assess what is happening, and we can give you a now, next, later roadmap or a more long-term roadmap. We can work and integrate with your existing employees to actually achieve these goals, work towards this end goal. And even if you're in a really poor state, like maybe you've moved to the cloud and you're having trouble modernizing, it's really two sides of the same coin. So if you come in, if you engage us for an AI readiness assessment, and we come in and we say, hey, you need to achieve these things. These are actually the same building blocks that lend towards being well architected and having an efficient, lean, sustainable, cost efficient model for running your technology. And so I think a lot of times companies try to go at it on their own, and they've got people that have been learning on the job, and they're spread thin. And sometimes it's just a matter of like the forest for the trees, right? Like having an outside set of eyes come in, especially when those eyes have been purpose trained on AI readiness and the possible use cases, how to leverage the technology, and just to put it out there, Ippon has built AI tools, right? And through that process, we found, oh wait, we actually have to do this for our own data, right? Because we have data. We're a consulting agency, but we have our own products, our own accelerators, our own documents. And so throughout this process, we've realized like these are the steps you have to take this piece of your business that is uniquely yours and turn it into some type of value that can be combined with AI to hit these end goals that our businesses are chasing after. And so it's not just that we've seen it at clients, but we've also done it for ourselves. And I honestly, like, we have a Ippon assistant. I I love asking it questions. This is I don't know. I like to ask it about like my direct reports and see how accurate it is. And it's crazy to me that it just knows them. Like it knows things about them. Of course, I could reach out to them and ask them, but a large organization, it's not always possible. But it's an interesting space to be trying to sell into, while simultaneously like we're trying to build our own tools and stuff, right? We're an AI first consulting agency. All of our consultants 100% AI proficiency as a requirement, and so even when we come to a client not for an AI readiness assessment, we are still looking at those things, right? Because the client always asks. We might be there for a migration, but they're going to ask, and we want to be ready to answer their questions.
Let's zoom out. How do you feel the the landscape of consulting will look in 10 years, given the industry shift to using generative AI tooling?
So I have a lot of opinions on this front. I think there will be a large part of the industry that is largely the same. Like in heavy compliance and regulated industries, they may be a little slower to adapt. But then there's going to be companies that, like any other company, build with AI first, grow, and then need to hire us for whatever difficult challenge they're working against. I think from the consulting standpoint, there will be a lot more aids available to us as far as having that stakeholder interaction, translating our technical work and ideas into things that stakeholders understand, how to speak to that value proposition. Um, I know personally, I use AI all the time to, I'll run something by it and just like, am I off base here? Here's both sides of the argument. Can you argue both sides of the argument and tell me all the details? Or hey, we're gonna do this readout for an executive team, and we're really worried that the message is not gonna land right. Can you help us craft this more better? Like, and a lot of times, what that lends to is when we get on the actual call and they try to throw their monkey wrench into the conversation, which they like to do a lot sometimes. We're already prepared for that because we've kind of vetted out every angle. And so similarly to where, I might give you a call and say, hey, we're working on this challenge, can you help advise me on this front? I know you worked with this piece of technology. Can you give me a couple bullet points? I feel like the AI tooling is going to be able to fill that role in. Like I'll still call you, of course, and ask you because I like to talk with you, but it's just more voices, more tools in the tool belt. And just like the analogy with the assembly and stuff, like there's still going to be this core of technology that is just not there, right?
What about in our primary focus in cloud and DevOps? How do you see generative AI changing what we do?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question. So it's huge, actually, because cloud and DevOps, the patterns are much more consistent, right? Like there's only so many ways to deploy an artifact or to scale a machine. Like when you look at all of the AWS services and all the possible combinations of Terraform modules and those state files, there's a finite amount of deltas that can happen there. And if you feed that to a large language model, it can give you surprising insights onto how that deployment may actually affect your systems running in production. So I imagine UAT and staging environments, dev environments to be very heavy on AI tooling, looking at diffs between Terraform state files, looking at things like analysis out of logs, things like guard duty, well-architected framework output, and helping to not only prioritize those tasks for the teams working on them, but also from an automation standpoint. Like imagine scaling an autoscaler that has intelligence that can look at not only CPU and memory metrics, but also at 1,000 other things. It can read log files and tell you, hey, something here is degrading. We're approaching, out of memory or something, right? There's a memory leak. There's so many ways it can be used inside the context of running, hosting, deploying, and you'll hear a lot of kind of like people talking against that, saying, oh, like we could never put an agent system into a cluster autoscaler. But I ask, and they'll say things like, well, what about compliance? Who are they going to point the finger at when it breaks? And I ask the question, is compliance about pointing fingers or about keeping people's systems safe and secure? And who's going to win out? The agentic AI or people. So I think that there'll still be a place for us cloud and DevOps engineers, of course. We'll probably be configuring those systems that automate and act on signals coming out of those deployments, but it's a very interesting, fast-moving space. So more to come, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm fired up, and I think it's heading in the right direction.
I have two follow-up questions for this. First, as people leaders within a consulting practice, how can we help guide our reports uh, through this changing dynamic of artificial intelligence?
Sure. So first and foremost, as a leader, you should always be leading as example. If you're on a call with your team, with your direct report, just mention how you used AI in your own workflow, right? And gauge the reaction. Okay, people may have an emotional reaction like, "Oh, I can't believe you're doing that. I thought better of you," or they might be like, "Oh, I'm doing that too. It's great," right? And then you just work from there, right? If people are kind of antagonistic towards AI, we need to find out why. Well, what's the underlying root cause there? Are they having fear of job loss? Are they not wanting to learn something new? And if that's the case, why be in technology, right? But yeah, no, I think the most important thing though is like, as a leader, you have to be using it yourself, talking about it in a positive light. It's okay to crack jokes about hallucinations and things, but bring the times that it actually did save you time and effort and mental capacity, and share that with your team. And you can lead a horse to water, but they got to drink.
Okay, so on the same thread, what about our clients? How can we be better partners to our clients?
That's a good one because with a client, they may have restrictions on AI use. And so there are some ways around that. Like if they have public facing data portals, you can pull data onto your own machine and do some AI thing and potentially tell them about it. That needs to be taken on a case by case, stakeholder by stakeholder basis. But just sharing information about, hey, this is what we're seeing at other clients. This is where the industry's heading. It's a difficult challenge. I know there are lots of clients out there that truly believe that this is just another fad, and I I don't think it's a fad. I think that they'll find very quickly that competitors are popping up in the market, and by that time it'll be too late. So just educating them about what is possible. A lot of times they hear AI and they just immediately think large language models. It's a good time to talk machine learning. Say, hey, well, you may not want large language models for whatever reason, biases, hallucinations, security. Maybe there's tenancy issues with private data. Who knows? Um, but you could always start the conversation with just regular ML, right? Because it's becoming popular again, and a lot of the operations workflows are very similar, right? You train an artifact, you put it somewhere, and you run inference. The levels of compute required are obviously different, but I don't know. The important thing is to be having the conversation. Obviously, don't break any rules. Don't go outside of their red lines. But there's no reason you can't bring it up and talk to them about it. I've had stakeholders tell me, I was listening to everything you said up until you said AI. And that's just very disheartening to me because, I've had stakeholders tell me, well, ChatGPT told us how to fix it, but we're not doing that because it came from ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT has the right answer more often than it's wrong, and so it's just I think it's a perception thing. And again, you gotta expose the root cause there, right? Just like in a system, like there is some underlying reason that they feel that way, and usually tied to fear, uncertainty, and doubt surrounding the technology or their job or the continuity. And oftentimes there's pressures too that we're not privy to, right? Like their own stakeholders, their bosses, their internal business stakeholders may have strong opinions that they have to align with, and so just proceeding with caution and pushing as much as feasible. But ultimately, when we work with a client, we're there to do the job that they're paying us to do, and so it's a give and take.
Luckily for us, Ippon is fostering a culture of artificial intelligence adoption. We're experimenting with AI tooling and encouraging all of our consultants to explore and adopt as much artificial intelligence as possible. Uh, can you talk about that experience a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the AI COE and the other COEs at Ippon are fantastic. They're kind of like innovation incubators. It's a great way for cross-team collaboration between the practices, but it also, it goes on our website. We have thought leadership about these things that come out of those centers of excellence. So when we get brought onto a client, they've looked at our website And it kind of helps set the precedent that like, hey, they're hiring a consulting agency that is AI ready, AI equipped, AI first, and that's a good way to start the conversation. Is like, they usually know what our capabilities are and how we feel about it and what we are looking into long before we ever actually engage with the client. But just as a consultant and as an engineer, I'm super thankful to be able to experiment and build, on the side, and it's a great way to learn. I mean, you can read and study all day long and gain vast amounts of theoretical knowledge, but actually building like a retrieval augmented generation chatbot, with engineers in your own organization as an experiment, it doesn't have to go public. The data never has to leave the network. It's a cool experience, and then you're all learning together. You're sharing knowledge, and yeah, I think Ippon is very smart to do this, right? You see all the big players are doing it. They're talking about their AI capabilities, not just what they can do for the client, but how they're augmenting their engineers and their consultants. And we're right there with them, And it can be a bit of sometimes there's things I ask AI to do, and it actually ends up a net negative from time investment. But I learn this is not the right thing to ask the AI, right? And so it's just without actually doing that and going through the motions, you don't start to build that knowledge and repertoire and kind of like, you get all the words, buzzwords, of course, but also, the words to talk to other engineers. So when we go to a client, maybe they're already on their journey to building some AI solution. We're well equipped to talk with them and understand their pain points because we did that ourselves, and any center of excellence is going to be just a wealth of innovation and knowledge sharing. So it's a positive thing no matter what.
So you speak a lot on artificial intelligence yourself,
I do.
um, and I'm curious, what do you do in your off hours to keep up with the trends in artificial intelligence?
That is a great question. There are a load of probably AI powered tools out there that will give you condensed feeds, right? So we have one integrated in our Slack at Ippon. It's called the AI Overview, and it's just high level bullet points. Most of it I just read and scroll past. Sometimes you drill down into things, but that's kind of like the public facing AI piece, right? Where there's a business case tied to it and they're trying to sell something. But on the other side, on the engineering side, it's like, especially from a cloud standpoint, I know what cloud capabilities are and Kubernetes and infrastructure as code and all these pieces, and trying to understand and do thought experiments in my head about like, what does this look like to run this at scale and to implement this in this existing setting? Because I mean, there's a million ways to deploy something, to run something in the cloud. Lots of services have lots of overlap, but when you throw in, well, they have some AI or ML use case. Um, you just go through the motions in your head. If you have the capabilities or the sandbox to actually be able to test those things out, it can sometimes be a little hard on your own because of costs and stuff, GPUs and things like that. Especially if you're trying to learn about training, like it can be difficult to learn that stuff without having an organization behind you. But one of the things I do is I try to look at like what are these new startups and new tools are that are getting a lot of traction, what they're actually doing under the hood, and that'll help me understand, well, what are the patterns that are emerging that many companies are adapting. I have a talk on multi-tenancy in large language model ecosystems, and I'm working on a new talk about agentic AI meshes, which I've touched on briefly about basically a mesh of agents that can run your Kubernetes cluster for you. There are Kubernetes operators out there that you can plug AI agents into that can control all the things. Right, everything's got an API, just like in the cloud, and so there's loads of stuff. Be curious, read lots, watch videos, and most importantly, tinker. Have a home lab. Have multiple home labs. If you can't afford a home lab, look up bespoke service providers. You can get huge machines hosted in places like Texas data centers for little to nothing, just because somebody wants to host machines, right? Lane Cloud comes to mind, but
Yeah, we all have our pet projects.
yes.
Before we wrap this up, reflecting back on your own career, what is one piece of advice you'd give yourself 10 years ago?
Ooh, that's tough. I reflect a lot on previous Lucas. And I have lots of advice to give, life advice and career advice to my younger self. But one of the things that I always come back to is don't be afraid to kind of break out of the box that you're working in currently and look over here at something. I can't tell you how many months, potentially years, I wasted just like spinning my tires on one challenge, when if I would have just looked elsewhere, there was so many solutions. And so, challenge your own assumptions. If you are stuck, try to step back and think outside the box. There's just so much that you don't know, right? Even now, there's an infinite amount of knowledge and information out there. You can't know everything, and you don't know what you don't know. So Dunning-Kruger effect, stay far, far away. Just stay humble and never stop learning. Stay curious.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lucas.
And thank you to the Charlotte Beer Garden for hosting us today. Until next time, let's toast to knowledge and connection, one episode at a time.